Greetings, folks. I'm Gamgee, and welcome to Quick and Dirty Roleplaying. In this video, I'll talk about the strange math behind a particular game mechanic from Green Ronin's adventure game engine system, the one used for Dragon Age, Fantasy Age, Modern Age, The Expanse, and most recent, at the time of this recording, Simple Adventure Age engine, Sage. From here. In each iteration of these games or rule sets, one of the d6s used in their 3d6 action roll is always of a different color, so that when doubles are rolled, that different colored die produces stunt points, a use it or lose it currency that is spent on stunts presented in a stunt table. Regardless of the rule set in question, for the purposes of this video, I'll call this special stunt point generating die the stunt die. Aside from being integral to Age's signature game mechanic, the system's creator, Chris Promise, and those that have contributed to expand upon the system from the Dragon Age TTRPG onward, had decided that when it comes to determining the degree of success of the task, or failure, as was most recently added in Sage, instead of looking at how much the total roll exceeds the target number or fails to meet the target number to determine the potency of the outcome, which is how it's typically done in rollover or roll under systems, the number rolled on the stunt die itself, the outcome, would make that determination. This makes it so that instead of doing addition or subtraction to figure out the potency of the outcome, you can simply look at the number of the stunt die to make that determination. Very fast, no arithmetic involved. Despite the surface level snappiness of stunt die roll as outcome is concerned, I immediately noticed an issue with this. Typically, as mentioned before, the greater the total roll exceeds or fails to meet the target number, the more impactful the outcome. However, assigning the outcome result to one of the d6s in a 3d6 roll completely disregards the modifier aspect of the 3d6 roll. And this modifier aspect represents every influence that is not dependent on pure luck, i.e. the dice roll. Examples include character ability, environmental circumstances, the text, conditions beyond standard functionality, oppositional forces, equipment quality, help from others, etc. While those things do affect a character's chances of success, with Age, the adventure gaming engine, they don't affect the quality of that success, which is very unintuitive. Rather than stop there, however, I decided to work out the math behind the way Age determines the degree of outcome. As a disclaimer, my analysis includes Sage's rule, where the stunt die also determines the degree of failure when a character rolls below the target number, whereas in previous titles, if a character failed an action roll, they simply failed and there is no mechanic for determining degree of failure. First off, in Sage, there are a maximum of 12 distinct outcomes whenever a character makes a 3d6 action roll, and they fall under two intersecting spectrums: success, failure, and the degree, the combination of the two referred to as the outcome. Meeting or beating the target number on a 3d6 roll will put part of the outcome as either a success or a failure. The number that shows up on the stunt die will determine the potency of that success or failure. The potency range goes from 1 to 6, which will coincide with the results you can get on a d6. This makes for 6 failure outcomes, F1 to F6, and 6 success outcomes, S1 to S6. I would describe each of one of the 12 outcomes as follows. S1 is meeting the bare minimum. S2 is like saying, that's not so good of a success. S3 would be considered a satisfactory success. S4 is saying Okay, that's notably good. That's noticeably good quality. S5 is an amazing success, and S6 is a flawless success. F1 is almost meeting the bare minimum. F2 is saying that's not so bad of a failure. F3 is an unsatisfactory failure. F4 is saying, oh, that's noticeably bad quality. F5 is a terrible failure, and F6 is an absolute disaster. After laying out the 12 maximum possible outcomes, I first charted out 3d6 roll combinations and the outcomes they produced when rolling 3d6 plus 0 versus a target number 11, which is basically a success rate of 50%. There were some key points that stuck out. First point is that all 12 outcomes are able to occur. While it may seem obvious, I find it important to state because when the chances of success are very high, when the net TN is 8 or less, or very low, when the net TN is 14 or more, at least one or more of these outcomes will not ever occur. More on that later. And the second point, due to how the math plays out, determining outcomes in this manner makes characters look more competent more often than not, whether or not they succeed or fail. Time to elaborate on that second point. When the odds of success are 50-50, basically 3d6 plus 0 versus target number 11, the most likely outcomes are F1, which is almost meeting the bare minimum for success, and S6, which is a flawless success. And the least likely outcomes are F6, which are absolute disasters, and S1, barely succeeding at all, like an ugly success. For the other outcomes, the better they make the character look upon success, or the less bad they make the character look upon failure, the more likely that outcome is to occur. Now, when the odds of success are not 50-50, however, something strange occurs. So between target numbers 9 and 13, regardless of whatever number comes up on the stunt die, it's always possible to get any of the 12 outcomes. If the stunt die roll is a 6, you can still get 2 1s on the other d6s and fail a target number 9 task. If the stunt die roll is a 1, you can still get 2 6s on the other dice and succeed on a target number 13 task. The next point. When the odds of success are below 50-50, it becomes more likely to generate outcomes F1 to F6. Or it just becomes more likely to generate failure outcomes than success outcomes. Even then, however, the lower the potency of the failure, meaning the closer to F1, the greater likelihood of generating that outcome, and vice versa, the closer to F6. When odds of success are above 50-50, it becomes more likely to generate the successful outcomes, S1 to S6. Even there, however, the higher the potency of the success, the closer to S6, the greater likelihood of generating that outcome, and vice versa. The closer to S1, the less likely it is of generating that outcome. Even when the chance of success is not 50-50, looking foolish is still less likely, and coming across as competent is still more likely. All that being said, when we get to the extremes of chances to succeed or fail, that's where the math reaches logical and thematic weirdness. When it's impossible to fail, target number 3 or less, every success outcome is equally likely. When it's impossible to succeed, a net target number of 19 or more, every failure outcome is equally likely. Granted, in every age system title, the difficulty chart starts at 7, which is considered routine difficulty. Implicitly, any target number under 7, basically any difficulty easier than routine, should be assumed to succeed, even if your total modifier is less than 0, thus increasing the net TN at 7 or more. And that would make it a punishment against characters with a poor degree of ability, like -2, or otherwise disadvantaged in some manner, and thus netting a similar dice roll penalty. While this does bypass the need to determine success or failure, as success is assumed, there doesn't seem to be an assumed degree of success, or not one that I've come across. In such a case, here's a solution that I propose that would go in line with the system's logic. Whenever you come across a situation where the difficulty is easier than routine, and you want to find out how the degree of success, just roll 1 stunt die plus an extra stunt die per +4 of the total dice roll modifier of the 3d6 action roll. So if your dice roll modifier is +7, you would roll the 1 plus the 1 extra, because it hasn't gone to like +8. Add up the stunt dice rolled to determine your success outcome. Anything beyond S6 is still considered flawless, but when comparing them to other flawless outcomes, the highest success outcome is the best among them. Now, this method that I explained is the equivalent of assuming success and then spending 4 fortune points to buy the 2 stunt point stunt improved outcome from Sage. Although in this instance you can quote-unquote buy it multiple times. On the upper end of the difficulty, the chart ends at target number 21, which is considered nigh impossible difficulty. Anything more difficult is just impossible to do. Now, I understand that target numbers 19 and 21 are listed so that when a character's dice roll modifier will bring the net target number down to 18 or less, it becomes possible to succeed at imposing and nigh impossible tasks, especially as characters level up and raise their ability ratings to ever more impressive degrees. However, if a character cannot muster the ability to justify a high enough modifier to change the net target number of an imposing task, target number 19, or a nigh impossible task, target number 21, down to target number 17, which would be considered formidable difficulty or less, we get into the realm of each type of failure outcome being equally possible to get. A 1 in 6 chance of getting from F1 to F6, regardless of how far off the mark they are from rolling the minimum modified roll of 18. In such a case, here's my proposed solution to generating failure outcomes where failure is just guaranteed and you just want to find out how bad they failed. If the character is attempting a task with a net target number of 19 or 20, roll 2 stunt dice and use the higher of the 2 as a failure outcome. If the character is attempting a task with a net target number of 21 or higher, roll 2 stunt dice and add them together to generate the failure outcome. The logic behind this is that there are only 2 task difficulties that can be attempted, but can also be impossible to successfully accomplish if the circumstances don't provide enough advantage to have even the slightest chance of success. This assumes that the more impossible and out of your league task seems, the more likely you're going to lean towards catastrophe when you do make the attempt. That might not always be the case, and if the GM doesn't think it is, meaning that if a task is so hard that the skill difference between you and that task is just trying to form words here because I'm going off script. Like, say for example, you're not able to roll a, like, between two tasks. One of them that's target number 19 and another one is target number 21. Normally the case would be that you would achieve greater degrees of failure when rolling against a target number 19 a target number 21 task than a target number 19 task. That's one train of thought, and it may not be like empirically true. If you don't buy into that train of thought, then just roll a stunt die to determine the failure outcome. That's what I'm trying to get at here. Okay, and as a matter of personal preference, if the net TN of a task goes beyond 15, which would make it lower than a 9% chance of success, that's when I would tell the player, unless you can improve your circumstances or reduce the scope of your goal, which effectively lower the TN, then the task is beyond your skill. This is something of an OSR approach that incentivizes players to use their head more than rely on the Hail Mary of rolling a 16 to 18 on 3d6. It also minimizes the strangeness of, oh, I just barely made the target number, but it was a spectacular outcome, since the only success outcomes you can generate on such high TNs are, let me see, for TN 16, that would be success outcome of 4 or higher. In conclusion, what seemed like a game design faux pas at first actually turned out to be a pretty reasonable and quicker alternative to determining degree of success or failure when compared to the actual difference between the action roll and the target number to determine degree of success or failure that skews towards characters being more impressive regardless of success or failure. Is this better overall? I wouldn't say so, but it's also a valid game design choice. And the emphasis on impressiveness over apparent realism is also a valid philosophical choice as well. If you found this video thoughtful and would like to leave a comment, please keep it respectful and relevant. Take care, folks, and play to find out what happens.